Eagles Entertainment.
The journey to the draft is driven by AAA. AAA Roadside is their strong side. Make AAA a part of your game day today. AAA, go ahead.
With the 25th pick in the NFL Draft, the Philadelphia Eagles select.
You're listening to the Journey to the Draft podcast, driven by AAA.
Welcome to the Journey to the Draft podcast, driven by AAA. I'm your host, Fran Duffy, and we've got an awesome weekend of games to look ahead of us here in college football, and we will kick things off looking at those matchups with Ben Fennell in Saturday Scouting, where this week we're going to break down some of those matchups. We've got a new mock draft to look at, and we'll highlight the traits that we value most at the free safety position. That will be a fun conversation as always. After that, I catch up with Ben Solak from the Draft Network to talk about some of the players that are being mocked to the Eagles in a lot of mock drafts all around the internet, and also how those players would fit here in Philadelphia. And then we'll wrap things up with my buddy Ross Tucker, Pick Six. We're going to pick some games once again, go head-to-head, as we always do every single week. Before we get the show started, again, best way to throw us your support. Go on to Apple Podcasts, leave us a rating, leave us a comment. It's the best way. If you want to give us a little gift for the holidays, that's the best way to throw us your support. All right, let's get things going. It's time. Kick things off with Ben Fennell and Saturday Scouting.
It's time for Saturday Scouting.
All right, well, let's get things going here on Saturday Scouting, and we'll start with some big news in college football. Once again, Alabama head coach Nick Saban tests positive for COVID-19. He is symptomatic this time. Thankfully, just so far, mild symptoms for the future Hall of Fame head coach. Last time it turned up as a false positive, and he was able to coach that weekend against Georgia. This week against the Iron Bowl, my guess is that will not be the case, considering that he is symptomatic. So, hopefully, best wishes to Nick Saban, and hopefully he can recover very, very soon. That's the big news, I would say, around college football as we record this Wednesday morning. But, Ben, let's get into some of the big matchups here this weekend because, as I mentioned, we got the Iron Bowl, but we've got a bunch of big rivalry games here this weekend in college football. We'll talk through a couple matchups. I'll let you kick things off. What's one big matchup you're looking forward to seeing this weekend?
Well, this one's, I don't know if it's a rivalry or not, but I don't think a lot of people are noticing how well this West Virginia defense is playing and how many NFL prospects are on this defense. You got the Stills brothers up front, but my eyes are on linebacker Tony Fields. He's heading to the Senior Bowl. He's the Arizona transfer, tackling machine, ball magnet, seems to always be around the ball, always around the line of scrimmage, mirroring the quarterback, QB spies, sub-rushing, can mirror running backs on the second level. But he plays Oklahoma this week. Lincoln Riley loves to mess with the eye discipline, a second-level defender. So this one's not so much a physical test for him. I want to see how he handles the mental test, the reading plays, maybe getting caught up with backfield action, because we see that a lot on Sundays now. So this is a big game for me in Tony Fields and kind of rating him as a prospect. Right now I have him at linebacker 5 or 6. With a good performance against an Oklahoma team, he might be LB 3-4 and a solid day 2 pick.
And you look at him, too, from not only from an eye discipline standpoint, but when he's one-on-one in the hole with Ramondre Stevenson, that guy's a train. We talked about him earlier this week. That'll be an interesting matchup for sure. I'll stick with a similar kind of look here. Notre Dame against North Carolina. And this one's an interesting one, too, because I think when you look at both of their abilities in pass protection and in the pass game, Chaz Surratt, one of his best traits, outstanding blitzer from the second level. So you look at him against Kyren Williams in pass protection, the Notre Dame running back, he has been outstanding this season. So not only can these guys play sideline to sideline, Kyren Williams has been a great running back for the Irish this year. He's done a lot of great things downhill on the perimeter. He can catch the ball a little bit, but namely in pass protection, I'm really, really excited to see Surratt against Kyren Williams, because Surratt, I know I posted a clip over the summer of him putting Travis Etienne, the Clemson running back, on his backside with a blitz. I'm interested to see how Kyren Williams holds up in this game. I really thought about taking North Carolina as an upset here. We'll talk about that a little bit later in the show.
Hey, I was at the game last year where they nearly upset Clemson. I'm going with the North Carolina upset here. I know Notre Dame's been a darling this year, but the other side of the ball, don't change the channel, because North Carolina, those two running backs, Michael Carter, Javonte Williams, they're going to give Notre Dame linebackers all they can handle. But we're going to go over to the Big Ten here. Illinois looked pretty good last week now that they got Brandon Peters back under center at quarterback. The Michigan transfer, he's been in and out of lineup with injury. The whole lineup is built to transfers of a who's who around the country. But Josh Imatorbhebhe, He leaped, I think it was 44 or 45 inches out of high school, had an impressive above the rim catch last week. They play Ohio State. And it could be kind of an upset special type of game that Illinois has a lot of interesting talent. They looked so much more confident last week against Nebraska with Peters under center. I kind of like Illinois here and Lovie Smith. They might give Ohio State all they can handle.
Yeah, that's a really interesting matchup, certainly to keep an eye on there in the Big Ten. I am going to go to the SEC, to that Iron Bowl that I referenced earlier. Look at the oversized wide receiver, Seth Williams for Auburn. This is a guy that can play above the rim, just like what you were just saying earlier. Seth Williams has been that kind of guy for the Auburn offense. Going up against this Alabama secondary, namely the corner, Patrick Surtain Jr., I'm excited for this matchup. It's one that I'll certainly be watching when I go back to study Seth Williams. And even watching Surtain, I think this is going to be a big matchup for him. His ability to go up, climb the ladder, and finish, I think, will be big against that Auburn towering receiver on the perimeter. They've got some speed. Anthony Schwartz there for Auburn as well. They've got some playmakers on that side of the ball, but Seth Williams is certainly the name to keep an eye on when he's going up against Patrick
And Josh
Surtain.
Jobe on the other side of Patrick Surtain has a lot of good size, is a good press corner as well. It seems like Alabama always has that kind of other corner, whether it's like Anthony Averett, or Levi Wallace, opposite of Marlon Humphreys. They have a lot of interesting depth. They may not have been on the field a whole lot, but Josh Jobe on the other side of Surtain is another interesting NFL prospect.
It's funny. I was talking with somebody earlier today, and they asked, Alabama DBs, they kind of scare me. They haven't always worked out. But then I kind of went back and just looked at the list of the DBs that have come out of Alabama over the last couple of years. Just going back to 2017. You look at Eddie Jackson, one of the better safeties in football. Marlon Humphrey, one of the richest corners in football. Levi Wallace was undrafted, became an early starter for the Bills, has turned into a nice player. Anthony Averett, now a starter for the Ravens on the opposite side of Marlon Humphrey, or next to Marlon Humphrey. Minkah Fitzpatrick, one of the top safeties in football. Deontay Thompson turned into a key role player and starter for the Cardinals in that secondary. And then Xavier McKinney this year, obviously injured in preseason, so we haven't seen
They may not
him
all
yet.
hit their ceiling, but they all have such high, safe floors, in my opinion. They're going to be good special teams players. They could play NFL ready with the scheme and the press man, acclimate down there in Alabama. I think they're just the safer floor players.
But it's interesting, though, but when you get past that cutoff of 2017 and you go back 2016, 15, now you're going into like Cyrus Jones, didn't work out with the Patriots. Landon Collins only was one contract with the Giants. Clinton Dix, one contract with the Packers. Vinny Sunseri, D. Milner, Mark Barron. You start getting into those names. It's kind of interesting that, from that point, there's like this line of demarcation between 16 and 17, which also kind of coincides with when Kirby Smart left Alabama to go to Georgia. That was in the 2016 and 2017. That's a weird coincidence, but kind of interesting. Just kind of looking at those Alabama DBs, I don't feel like that narrative necessarily plays anymore.
Like Jared Maiden, who is undrafted.
Yeah.
Another one of those sub-package guys that wasn't a star, but a reliable player. He's on the Niners practice squad. He's the next one that I think will work his way into the lineup.
All right, let's get to our mock draft roundup here. And we're going to pick a mock draft, and we're going to, typically we're looking at who the Eagles select and who else is going in that area. We're going to take a little bit of a different spin here this time, because every single mock draft has the Eagles taking Notre Dame linebacker Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, and we are going to talk about him later in the show with Ben Solak. But for this one, I wanted to take a look at Ryan Wilson from CBS Sports, his latest mock draft. We'll just take a couple of picks that stand out to both of us, and I'll start things off. Cowboys, number 4 overall. They take Michigan pass rusher Kwity Paye. This is about as high, Ben, as I've seen Kwity Paye go in a mock draft. And obviously, I know you've watched the tape on him almost every single week this year, if not every single game. And I know that he has really, really stood out to you. But for him to go up that high, I think speaks a lot to the way that he's played so far this season. Was not that player to me going off the 2019 film, but I know that you've seen it. He's been a very dominant presence for that Michigan front.
Well, the visual of Kwity Paye's stock is the Price is Right yodel game, where that guy's just climbing that mountain, working his way up. It seems like he's been ascending the last couple of months. Michigan hasn't been looking good, in the win total and on the field, but Kwity Paye individually has been one of the terrors of college football, really tough to block. At number 4 is a little rich, but he's going to have that or be in that conversation of being the number 1 pass rusher off the board, whether it's him or Gregory Rousseau or maybe somebody else, not those two, but we're still figuring out who that number 1 pass rusher is. It's a highly coveted position by NFL teams.
What was your first, your big takeaway here?
Well, seeing Zach Wilson, QB3, seems like that's the way it's trending as well. At number 5 overall to the Washington football team. Sounds like they're going to hit reset on the quarterback position. Zach Wilson at number 5. That's another player that's the highest I've seen him, but a guy that's been trending, and his trajectory of his stock has just been soaring through 2020.
I'm going to stick at the quarterback position here. The Patriots going quarterback at number 12 overall with Alabama's Mac Jones ahead of Trey Lance. And I think that's really, really interesting. I have not studied Mac Jones yet. I'm interested. Do you feel like Mac Jones is that kind of player? We're talking like top 15?
I do. And it's not so much Mac Jones at 12 is the news. It's Mac Jones ahead of Trey Lance is the news, in my opinion. We all know quarterbacks get pushed up. I think this is going to be a year like we had, with Christian Ponder and Jake Lockard and Blaine Gabbert, and could end up 5 quarterbacks in the top 15 the way it's kind of trending. But I like Mac Jones. I think he's a safe player, and he's kind of been the one that's just sitting there ho-hum, looking to the left and the right. Like, what about me, guys? All I do is show up and throw the ball over the yard and get wins in the SEC. What about me, guys? And it seems like he's that one that's forgotten until we get into the draft cycle. Now he's a coveted prospect that's all of a sudden QB4 and leapfrogging guys like Trey Lance.
What do you like here for your second takeaway?
I like J.C. Horn, man. At number 11 overall, cornerback 3 right after Surtain and Caleb Farley. Virginia Tech seems like he's that next press corner. Just like the way C.J. Henderson flew up boards last year, ended up being, somewhere between 10, I don't know, was he 8 to the Jacksonville Jaguars?
Something like that, yep.
Anyways, Detroit, once again, going press corner. They took Okudah, number 3 overall last year. They find the other corner now in J.C. Horn. Those are 2 big press corners. Now it's just a matter of, is Matt Patricia going to hang on and be there next year to, give that defense one more year in a scheme?
Yeah, it's certainly an interesting one. Do you feel that Horn is a guy that's worthy of the top? Obviously, he's number 11 there, a top 15 pick.
I do. And the way Dane kind of formulated it to me, he's an Aqib Talib style of player. He's very feisty. He might end up being a better pro. He's a little inconsistent on tape at South Carolina. You go through a gauntlet of receivers in the SEC. He's taken his lumps, believe me, whether it's LSU last year, those Alabama receivers. But it's a learn-on-the-job position. And if you need a big press corner, he looks like the part. He's big, he's long, he's tough. He contributes in run support, gets his hands on footballs and forcing fumbles. I like him. He's a little feisty, a little grabby, gets a lot of penalties, but I kind of like that at a corner. So if you need a press corner, which I'm not sure the Lions do because they have Jeffrey Okudah, but if you don't have 2, I guess you got to go get that second one.
Well, my third takeaway, I'm going to go later in the round to the Jets at number 25. It's always interesting because the Jets have 2 first-round picks. They're always number 1. They're always going to take Trevor Lawrence in almost every mock draft. Who do they pair with Trevor Lawrence? We've seen Travis Etienne in this spot. Here they take Minnesota wide receiver Rashad Bateman, and I love it. I love pairing a guy like Bateman with Trevor Lawrence. They already have Denzel Mims there, so a couple of big targets. That's what he's used to throwing to at Clemson. They like those big towering receivers out in the perimeter. You get Bateman, you get Denzel Mims there with Lawrence. I think that's a really interesting combination there for the Jets moving forward. What was your takeaway there to round things out?
Yeah, last, just kind of looking at the 20s here. Very low year for interior defensive linemen. I see Barrymore and J. Tufele squeezing there at 27. A little bit of a run on receivers. You go Waddle, Devonta Smith, Rondell Moore, Rashad Bateman, back to back to back to back. 4 straight receivers there in the 20. And then another year where the first running back off the board is number 32, the very last pick in the first round. Last year with Clyde Edwards-Helaire to the Chiefs. This year, Travis Etienne to the Steelers, which is interesting, kind of a countering style to go with, James Conner and Benny Snell. Travis Etienne, much more of that slashing type to kind of pair with those bruisers.
And I think of Etienne, the running in that they run a lot of gap scheme offense. To me, like that fits him perfectly. Like, you get him on counter, you get him on power, you just get him going downhill, a little bit of some of the pin pull stuff that they'll do. I think Etienne fits.
Stylistically,
kind of
not that different from a Le'Veon Bell when he was in Pittsburgh. That's still kind of slow to the line. I run a little upright, a little slow, a little patient, and then can put his foot in the ground and dart through the line of scrimmage. I could see him kind of fitting into that scheme pretty well.
He's got more of that top end juice that
absolutely
that
you want to get him involved in the
have.
screen game too, and the pass game, just like Le'Veon was as well.
No question. So, like I said, the Eagles at 19 in that draft, taking Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. We'll talk about JOK a little bit later in the show. Let's wrap this one up. We're going to go under the hood, where every single week we pick one position and 3 traits that matter to both of us when evaluating it. This week, we're going to talk about post safety, the free safety for most people. To me, it's important to say that obviously every team utilizes safeties a little bit differently. Some, it's very easily delineated between free safety, strong safety. Hey, the free safety is always going to play in the post. Strong safety is going to play close to the line of scrimmage. For a lot of teams, it might be left safety and right safety, where they are interchangeable and guys are moving all over the place. Some people like a safety to be able to play in the slot often, and it's getting more and more like that in today's NFL. But for us in this discussion, we're talking about the guys that are playing in the post. What are the traits you're looking for, if that's what you're looking for, someone to play in the deep part of the field? And I'll kind of kick things off for this one. And I'm going to go, for me, it's mental processing. It's your ability to key and diagnose. You cannot have a lot of mental missteps when you're playing the safety spot. While you are further away from the ball and you say, oh, well, you've got some time to be able to overcome some of that, you really don't. Today's NFL, with all the speed that people throw at you on the perimeter, down the field, you need those safeties to be reliable with their eyes, being able to understand what the offense is about to do and put yourself in a position to make a play on the ball. So to me, I'm willing to say, all right, I don't need the 4.4 speed and the outstanding physical traits. If you've got great eyes, I think you can overcome some of that. And to me, that's why I think you see a lot of guys that are on day 3 or undrafted free agents that are able to hit at the safety spot, because people are maybe the mental processing. You're overlooking that a little bit when it comes to the draft process. To me, that's the number one thing I'm looking for at the safety position.
And certainly different fits and styles for that back end safety, whether you're a single high team, so that you're more of a center fielder playing in the middle of the field, typically playing at 20 to 25 yards, or if you're a split safety team, playing half field responsibility, typically sitting at maybe 15 to 18 yards. So scheme base will also determine what style of player, and if you need a trait to weigh heavily or less than another style of scheme. But I'm right there with you, Fran. That back end player, you have to have the mental processing. You have to be able to feel and flow to the action. You have to have a feel for offensive design and how they're attacking you. That's your eyes, your key, your diagnose, your instincts, that first step. You're on the back of the defense. It's all in front of you. So understanding the flow to action and how you're being attacked and diagnosing plays with your eyes and processing first and foremost, that initial movement to the play, that initial flow is so important for the backside players. And we see all the time, I'm going to kind of just steal this from you and go right into the next point. In that first initial action is all about your angle and pursuit. In inserting into the play. And we see every week that back end player not taking proper angles to the football. And just when you think you're not involved in the play, suddenly you're that last line of defense and your angle is suddenly highlighted, whether you took a good angle or a bad angle. So I think that's such a combination trait, being able to key, diagnose your instincts, your feel and flow for the action, and then taking that proper pursuit angle, particularly to start those first 2-3 steps in the play.
And that's why, to me, like when we're, because that is the angles was my second thing that I look for. And to me, you could pair that with mental processing, my first one, but it's just so important to me that I had to keep it separate. And when you're talking about moving a corner to safety, he doesn't run well, we're going to move him to safety. That's the biggest hurdle to climb. If a guy's not used to seeing the game from that depth, from that point, from that vantage point, the taking good angles part is the hardest hill to overcome. Just talking with guys that have made that transition. So we're not just talking about taking it in the pass game, but even in the run game, running the alley. We talked about guys that can run the alley earlier this week, right?
The funny thing, Fran, that's what my mind goes right to. Yeah, is the run defense pursuit angles. And as you're talking, I'm like, oh, wait a minute, we really should mention the angles in the pass game.
No question.
It's funny how it's both.
Yeah, because if you're a guy playing in the post and there's a vertical route being thrown outside the numbers, do you have that ability to, and this goes to natural ball skills and tracking as well, but do you have that ability to get to the catch point efficiently? Can you track that ball, get to the catch point, then you get there and you have the ability to make a play and go up, climb the ladder, all that stuff. But your ball skills might be great. You might have the best hands of any safety in the history of the game, but if you can't get there, What good does it do? It doesn't do anything. It doesn't do you anything. So, and it's the same thing as a tackler. If you're as big and strong and powerful and explosive as anybody in the NFL, but you take a bad angle, that play strength is moot. You're literally, it does nothing for you. So the ability to take good angles downhill and sideline to sideline, to me, just a huge, huge part of playing the safety spot. What is your second?
It's got to be tackling. You're the last line of defense, and that safety position a lot of times determines the explosive play, whether it's going to be an 8 to 10 yard pedestrian gain or a 70-yard touchdown. A lot of times that's determined by the ability to tackle on the last line of defense, which is usually that free safety or that back end player. And a lot of times your ability to leverage those plays on the back end are all about your pursuit angles, first and foremost. Your read, your key, your diagnose, that first step, and attacking the ball carrier and leveraging the angle properly. But at the end of the day, you got to get the ball carrier on the ground. Yep. And I saw a couple quotes from Eric Weddle talking a few years ago about being that back end free safety. And he said, you know what? Sometimes it's not pretty. Sometimes I'm absolutely trucked and walloped by a big 230-pound running back in the open field. I took a huge brunt of contact, but I got him down. Sometimes I'm grabbing their ankle and holding on for dear life, but you know what? I got them down. Just that mentality at all costs, scratch and claw and grab and hold and whatever you have to do, get the ball carrier down, because that last line of defense determines the pedestrian gains from the 70-yard highlights you see on Monday morning on SportsCenter.
And to me, that's why my third trait was run defense. And you would never say, you really need run defense from a free safety. If you're going to start, yeah, you better believe that you need to be able to be a good run defender. So your ability to come up, finish from depth, and we talked about the difference in what does run defense look like from all these different positions, all these different safety spots. If you're playing in the post versus in the slot or in the box, it's going to be different kinds of skills that are needed to be an effective run player. To me, if you're playing in the post, you have to take a good angle. And then you've got to come down with the right temperament, with the right level of athleticism, break down, come to balance, finish one-on-one as a tackler. So you need the attitude, the toughness, the competitiveness, but then also the play strength and technique to be able to get that guy down to the ground. People overlook it and say, it's not that important. Guess what? You can see there's a long list of guys that were drafted high, that were drafted in the first 2-3 rounds at free safety. They say, they weren't great tacklers, but they could finish on the ball. They're great athletes that never started, got out of the league quickly, or they did play and they cost their team early. And I think that was one of the big examples I can think of. And this guy has turned into a fine run defender, but early in his career, and I remember him coming out of Utah, Marcus Williams, he was a second-round pick by the Saints coming out of Utah. And my big question with him was his ability to finish as a tackler one-on-one early in his career until he got bigger and until he got stronger. Saints go on, late in the year, doesn't really show up too often. Then what happens? Stephon Diggs makes a catch along the sideline. He misses the tackle, and it turns into one of the biggest comebacks in NFL playoff history. The Vikings come to Lincoln Financial Field instead of the Saints, and the Eagles go on to beat the Vikings and go to the Super Bowl. But the reason the Vikings are there is because of a Marcus Williams missed tackle. To me, tackling, run defense, extremely important no matter what kind of position you play at the safety spot. What was your third?
Yeah, absolutely. Here? And just in a general, we want this at every position, but I think the safety position is just that much more important. And just a combination of speed and fluidity. And that position is on the back end. You sit back, you survey, you read, you react. But Fran, you are never stale. You're never static. You're never not moving. You always have to make these decisions and adjustments while moving on the fly. You have to be able to change those directions, change your angles, change your intent, change your pursuit using your athleticism and doing it in a fluid fashion. And last night I was watching TCU safety Trayvon Moehrig, and they rolled him down into the box. He was guarding the slot. He then had to turn and run with the receiver. It was a double move. So he broke down, then had to rerun down the field. And it was just like there was 4 different moments of movement patterns in the play, constantly moving, rolling down, turning and running, breaking down, rerunning with the double move, finding the ball. It's just such a fluid position. And so many times you're changing things on the fly, whether you're reading the run for play action, and then all of a sudden you have to retreat and get back and split the difference between 1 and 2 and know how to break on the ball when it's in the air and take the proper angle. So, all those things between the ears and the keying and diagnosing and the tackling the angle. but it's all on the move. So you have to be able to use all that in combination with being a fluid athlete.
I love it. What is it that separates, in your mind, the elite players, the top end players in the league from the good players at this position?
I think it's the ball skills. I think it's the ones that don't panic when that ball is in the air. And there's so many different, nuances to that, whether it's the contact points and just understanding not getting too much contact and creating illegal contact, pass interference at the catch point. A lot of that is a savviness of playing the ball. We see a lot of contact down the field in DPIs because of those players on the back end not playing the ball properly. Not because they want to be physical, just because they're misjudging the ball in the air. So the ones that understand ball trajectory, not panicking when that ball is in the air, understanding how to feel, find, and cover while tracking the ball, and then the ones that can make the plays on the ball. So not just, putting yourself in position to get there with the savviness, but the ones that make those plays once you get there. That's what separates those B+, A- into the Ed Reeds of the world.
Yeah, I would say that 100% agree. It's what I talked about. Like you have the guys that it's a must-have trait for me, like the angles and the mental processing. But what then takes you next level is that ability. Once you're there, finish, make the play. It's a big play league. You got to make them. Don't give them up. If you can make them on the defensive side, that's big time as well. So I 100% agree with you on that one. Let's go to the players that we've watched in this class that best fit the mold of what we're talking about. It's funny because we just talked about this with guys that are running the alley, but is there a player or two that come to mind for you when you're talking about post safeties in this draft?
Yeah, I think there's a couple around college football in my mind. Immediately goes to USC's Isaiah Polamao, who's 6'4", 210, one of the longest, rangiest, back-end players. He covers a lot of ground being that post safety. But some of these Big 12 safeties, man, it's open spaces out there. It's a wide open offense, a lot of double moves. I just mentioned TCU safety Trayvon Morey, one of the most fluid, natural cover safeties in the country, really. There's other guys. Oklahoma State's Kobe Harvell-Pell is a big nickel, always playing in retreat, can find the ball. Caden Stearns at Texas, not the biggest guy, not really a box safety, but great ball skills, really fluid on the back end. Or maybe a guy a lot of people don't know yet. We've heard his name going to the Senior Bowl at Illinois State, didn't have a season. Christian Uphoff is 6'3", big, long, rangy, a lot like the way kind of Jeremy Chin was last year at Southern Illinois. This guy's big and long and covers a lot of ground on the back end. So it's a bunch of guys around college football, and there's plenty more. We could keep going, Fran.
I liked Uphoff. I studied 4 games of him like a week or two ago. He's going to the Senior Bowl. I like him as a future starter at the free safety spot. He's 6'3", 195. He's going to need a little bit more play strength, pack a little bit more on there, but he is a really interesting player, and I think that definitely he's got some starting traits to work with at the next level. To me, just a couple other guys I'd throw in there. I would look at Hamza Nasruddin. I think he's kind of got that multi-dimensional skill set that he's big and strong enough to play in the box, but he's also explosive enough to come downhill. I'd like to see he comes in a little bit hot sometimes, and that gets back to the angles we talked about. The other guy that I think a lot of people will mention is Andre Cisco from Syracuse, right? Because he's got that playmaking ability. He's got great range. He can finish on the ball. He's just so up and down, whether you're talking about as a tackler or with his angles and the mental processing. He'll, take a lot of missteps as well in the back end. So some teams are going to look at that a lot differently. I think a lot of coaches are going to say, I don't know if I can play him right now. There might be a lot of people that say, yeah, I want his playmaking ability in my secondary. And then another young player to keep an eye on just in his first year as a starter, Josh Proctor from Ohio State, a guy I talked about in the offseason as a name to watch in the future. This is a guy I think that's got free safety written all over him moving to the NFL. So
3 really good names there, Fran, for sure. And Oregon's got a bunch as well. Javon Holland, young kid, Verone McKinley III. Really bunch of fluid, athletic players on the back end there, too.
No question. There's a bunch of guys at the safety spot. It's a lot of fun to be able to watch all these guys. Well, Ben, thanks so much once again for chopping it up here on the Journey to the Draft podcast driven by AAA. We'll catch up with you early next week.
It's time for Mr. Relevant.
Well, excited to welcome back here to Mr. Relevant here on the Journey to the Draft podcast, driven by AAA. Ben Solak, a senior college football writer over at the Draft Network and co-host of the Locked On NFL Draft podcast. Ben, thanks for coming back, man.
Yeah, of course, Fran. I'm always glad to be here. Sleigh bells are ringing. That means draft season's inbound. It's always fun to see, fun to get ready.
All right, we're getting into the last month here of the NFL season, which means that a lot of fans all around the league are going to be starting to ingest all this NFL draft content. So we're going to do a little bit of an Eagles focus here, though, because there are a handful of names that I feel like are consistently mocked to the Eagles. There's one in particular that is in like every single mock draft, and we will start with him. I want to get your thoughts on a bunch of these guys, but we're going to start with Notre Dame linebacker Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. I'm interested to kind of get your thoughts on your evaluation of him in college, how you feel he projects to the NFL.
Yeah, no, I'm excited to hear your thoughts because I'll be very frank. I'm usually a regular listener, but busy season. I haven't listened in a couple weeks, so I don't know how you feel about some of these guys. Yeah. But with Joker there, Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, this is the sort of player in the summer you say, oh, if he checks box A, B, and C, then we might be looking at a first rounder. And then he comes out this year. He looks a lot heavier. A big part of his evaluation was, being listed at 215 last year. He looks more around 230 this year. And then being able to show a good box presence, despite the fact that he's regularly playing at the overhang, at over the slot receiver, over number 3. It's funny, Kyle Krabs, who I know has been on the show before, is one of our scouts at TDN, calls him, a more polished Davian Taylor, a high instinct Davian Taylor. Taylor, obviously the Eagles' 3rd-round pick out of Colorado last year, was a day 2 pick because athletically he was amazing, but he just hasn't played that much football. And so you knew he kind of had a developmental timeline in front of him. And I like that. I think it's a solid comparison. So to me, I still want to see Owusu-Koramoah move at a weight at the combine. That's still a box that I need to check for him. I want to prove the concept that he's got at least box size, even if he is a will linebacker and he's usually outside of the box. I want to prove that he has that size to be more than just kind of like a quasi safety. But film wise, he's done everything you'd like for him to see this year. So there's still that outstanding question of just how dense is this guy? How is he going to hold up with NFL strength? But if you're looking at a 230-pound athlete, then I do think he's a potential first-round player. Might be a little bit after the Eagles are picking, and we know that the Eagles also may not want a second-level run-defending linebacker player in the first round. But if he's like Davian Taylor, we know that he's got what they like.
And that's what I think is interesting, and I'm glad that you brought that comparison up because I wanted to ask you, how different is he in your mind from Davian Taylor, who obviously the Eagles just drafted? I'm interested to kind of get your thoughts on that, but you just kind of explained that, so I don't even need to ask the follow-up. I think he's really interesting because you obviously, look, the athleticism, the range, the explosive ability, and not just in an open space, but you see him, it just explode late and finish on ball carriers.
Yeah.
He's a really explosive, violent tackler. At times, I just think he's a little bit slow to key and diagnose against the run, especially when he's lined up inside, and that's going to be the transition, right? Because he's not going to be a slot player. He's not going to be an overhang player more often than not in the NFL. So I'm really interested to just continue to watch more and more. He's going to be a guy I end up watching a lot, and it's similar because we talk about evaluating safeties. You have to watch a lot of safety just to get a feel for him. I feel like Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah is going to be that kind of guy. I want to watch as many tapes as possible of this guy just to really get a good sense of his ability to make that transition to the NFL.
Yeah, and the thing with that, which is funny, and you don't think about it as an evaluator, but if Owusu-Koramoah played linebacker, he'd react to pretty much every play. With where he plays, he's only reacting to half a field, right? He's an overhang. He's over number 2. So if the run's going the other way, pursuit. You know what I mean? You got to watch double the film to get the same amount of volume as if he were kind of a traditional stack linebacker. So I agree with you absolutely. Yeah. He's interesting. If you draft him, you got to know what you're doing. You got to figure him out, and that can be a tough ask.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a really interesting case study. We say this every year because there's guys like this every year, but he's going to be another one. He's going to be another interesting case study, certainly just to watch how he projects to the NFL. I want to stay to the linebacker spot, and I've only seen him mock the Eagles a couple times because he was seen coming into the year as a blue-chip player, and this is Alabama linebacker Dylan Moses. I know that this year, from what I've been told, I have not studied Moses yet off 2020, but from what I've been told, the film hasn't been as great as that. But I'm interested to get your thoughts on Dylan Moses, how he projects to the NFL, and how he would fit here in Philadelphia.
Yeah, so, if we want to get what the narrative is on Dylan Moses, Moses gets an offer from Alabama and LSU as an 8th grader, right? So we kind of knew this guy coming out had that hero storyline coming in. He starts as a freshman and as a sophomore, 2017, 2018. He's just outside of this world. I mean, he's crazy good. 2019, he's going to be transitioning to Mike. He has the ACL injury during fall camp. doesn't play the whole season. Then he comes into his senior season, and he's moving from the will to the mic, and he's coming off of injury. Yeah, his 2020 film hasn't been as good as his 2018 film, but his 2018 film was nuts, right? Like it was top 5, top 10 pick. What are we talking about here? And he's got a position switch in a COVID-affected camp while coming off of injury. If his 2020 film had been as good as his 2018 film, this guy would have not been human. You know, with what he was up against, I still see a player who athletically looks like a first-round player, and then on top of that has shown film, has shown tape, has shown responsibilities and filling of a first-round player in terms of the mental aspects and how he carries himself, how he prepares himself, technique. And so I'm aware that we've got a 2020 year that's going to put more question marks in Moses's film if he had just been healthy for 2019 or if he had opted out. Absolutely, that's there, and we got to reconcile with that. But I still see the athlete that if you're drafting a linebacker, he needs to be on the field for 3 downs, needs to be impact against the pass and man and zone cover, blitzing as well. Dylan Moses used to play freaking edge for Alabama, just like for fun his freshman year. You know what I mean? Like this, we've still got that player. We still have that profile and that foundation. So to me, that's a player you're willing to take in the first round. Medical checks are important for Moses. The conversation between him and Owusu-Koramoah is fascinating because 2 wildly different players in terms of their responsibilities. What are you going to prioritize? Who's the future of your linebacker position in Philadelphia? You know, TJ Edwards, Davian Taylor, Nate Gary. Who are you sure you're going to be keeping around? And then who are the gaps next to them that you need to fill with a rookie? Kind of helps solve that question.
I love this linebacker group overall. I mean, you're looking at obviously Micah Parsons is an alien, but then you look at Dylan Moses, you look at Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, you look at Chaz Surratt, Nick Bolton, Jabril Cox. It's a really fun group of linebackers this year, and there's a couple other guys I think you could throw into that same mix. A couple other Alabama players I want to hit you with, and I'll ask you these guys in a dual question. Devonta Smith from Alabama, Jaylen Waddle from Alabama. To me, after Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, it's these 2 guys that I'm seeing the most often. How do you like both of them overall in terms of their transition, and how do you like their fit here with the Eagles?
Right, so the fit with the Eagles right now when it comes to receiver is if you're good, come. It's about as simple as that. Like obviously this team's had problems at wide receiver for a couple of seasons now, been struggling to get production. And so you don't want to get too wrapped up into things like fit and deployment. This was obviously a big conversation for Eagles fans between Rager, who's currently on the team, and Justin Jefferson last year, and kind of figuring out who the Eagles were going to like best and how they're going to fit him in. You just need talent. No wide receiver in college football is more talented than Devonta Smith, right? In terms of college level technique, production, 3 levels, what they do and how they do it. Devonta Smith's a pro playing at the college level. Could have come out last year. That would have been true. This year, it remains the same. Smith's right now listed at 175, and the history of sub 180-pound receivers in the league is not good. This Eagles team obviously is only a few years removed from bringing in one of the smallest running backs in history, Donnell Pumphrey, and seeing that his size was prohibitive to him being successful in the league. And so with Devonta Smith at 19, you're taking a swing at an outlier historically based off of his size, assuming he comes in at around 180. And it's funny because a lot of those outliers, Emmanuel Sanders, T.Y. Hilton, John Brown, are guys with really impressive game-breaking speed. It's going to be important to see how fast Smith is at that weight and how that can help you feel more confident in that evaluation. He's your possession receiver. 3rd and 5, there's nobody you want on your team more than Devonta Smith. On 1st and 10, a little wide receiver screen, Jaylen Waddle's the guy you want on your team because the running back-like ability, the ball-in-hand ability with Jaylen Waddle is insane. And that's not to take away anything from him as a route runner, as a deep threat. He can do both of those things. I think his ball tracking has improved from last year into this year, which is a big deal for his deep ball ability. But when you watch this guy in kick returns, when you watch him on screens, that's when you truly realize that this is a potentially special talent and a special player. Jaylen Waddle is not playing for the rest of Alabama's season because he's coming off of the injury. That means you got to check the box athletically and check the medical red flags, make sure that he's healthy and you expect him to be healthy for his rookie contract. But this is a dichotomy here between playmaking and reliability, explosiveness versus a possession receiver. And I said, the Eagles don't need to be going too much into fits and figuring out how they're going to get 3 on the field, so on and so forth. You just want talent. But that's going to be that conversation that you have when you evaluate Smith and evaluate Waddle. You're going to ask them to do different things on a down-to-down basis. You're not going to ask Smith to be making explosive plays with the ball in his hands. You're not going to be asking Waddle to win contested catches 8 yards over the middle of the field. They're different players in that way. So it depends on what you and your scouting staff prioritizes.
So I want to go from the skill position players in the SEC on the offensive side and go over to the defensive side because there are a couple corners at the top that I love personally, and that's Patrick Surtain Jr. from Alabama, Caleb Farley from Virginia Tech. There's another guy that now, especially since he's declared for the draft and he's opted out of the rest of the season, from South Carolina, J.C. Horn, who was a former Pro Bowler, Joe Horn, wide receiver, his son. All right, so he's at South Carolina. He has opted into this draft. I asked Ben this earlier, and I'm going to ask you this now. Do you feel that J.C. Horn is in that mix in the middle part, top end of the first round? And how do you view him moving forward to the NFL?
Yeah, it's funny. I told Trev the other day on Locked On NFL Draft on our draft podcast, J.C. Horn might not be from Philly, but he's from Philly because he's a mean, angry dude playing corner. Like, he is in your face, aggressive, letting you know how this game's going to go for 4 quarters. He has a style to him that would appeal to this city. It appeals to me. He's a fun dude to watch. That physicality up at the line of scrimmage, press man coverage is interesting for Philadelphia when you consider what changes they've made on defense with the addition of Darius Slay. After acquiring Slay from Detroit, Jim Schwartz gave the presser where he said we're going to probably play more man. And they have throughout the 2020 season played more man coverage than they did in previous years. If you're looking for a corner 2 opposite Slay, another true outside corner, they've had Avonte Maddox, who's obviously been in the slot here before, then J.C. Horn is a good option for you. When I watched J.C. Horn in 2019, I thought that the stiffness was worrisome. I thought that at times his transitions were limited, and that was going to matter at the NFL level. In 2020, he's had a very productive season. I still feel like he's not the transitional sort of athlete that you typically look for in a round 1 corner. That's not prohibitive to being successful at the NFL level, but it means you have to be so good at the line, so smart with your feet, so physical. If you make a mistake, it's going to be very difficult to recover. And with young corners, we're seeing it right now, young corners in this rookie class are really struggling overall. That's a position with a ton of volatility early. It's tough to get a round 1 corner even to be successful in their rookie year. So with Horn, I think culture fit makes sense, scheme fit makes sense. At 19, I'm not sure athletically he's what you want. But when we look at this corner class, like you said, behind Farley and behind Surtain, right now he's at the top of the conversation for corner 3. And so when you're looking at that group, he may be your best option if you want to go corner in round 1.
I do think it's funny because the Eagles, obviously, in almost every mock draft are 19, 19, 19. It's been the case over the last few weeks. And I think it's just funny because of the way the division shakes out. The Eagles are either going to be picking at 19 or they're going to be, low teens, high, or the high part of the top 10. It's going to be really interesting just to see ultimately how that goes.
I did the math, right? Because obviously there's a trade value chart. That's the equivalent of a middle 2nd round pick. Like if you want to trade from 19 to 9, that's a middle 2nd round pick. That could be it for the Eagles winning the division or not. Which obviously as Eagles fans, we'd like them to win the division. But as draft fans, mid-2nd round pick, baby.
That's exactly right. So a really interesting dynamic there. Last question for you, and I'll let you out. Who's a guy over the last few weeks, because we talked to you, I want to say early October, maybe the first week of October. Is there a guy that since then that you've watched that's really kind of caught your eye and say, man, all right, I got to do a little bit more work on this guy?
Yeah, I don't want to be, unoriginal because everybody's talking about him, but I don't care. Zaven Collins is nuts. Oh, he's so cool. He really is. This Tulsa linebacker, 6'4", 260. Jordan Reed with us was just publishing some clips on his timeline. And every time I watch him, I'm just in my head, I think I remember how big he is. And then I see him, I'm like, he's bigger than I thought. It reminds me of watching Tremaine Edmonds at Virginia Tech, where you were just like, how is this dude on the field? He's humongous. Collins is curious. I'm not sure how the league's going to view him, where they're going to want him. I think hybrid fronts and rush packages and your heavy blitz-oriented creeper defensive coordinators, they're going to like Collins more than the Eagles probably will, who just want more kind of traditional linebacker play. But with that said, movement skills at this size is every defensive coordinator wants that guy because you do 12 things with him. And that allows you to conceal tendency, be very versatile, and have him move around. And so there's a lot of reasons to watch Tulsa football. They rank 25 by college football playoff. They're a really fun team. They're going to be in the AAC championship. But if not alone for number 23 on defense, that kid's huge. He moves like crazy. He's a lot of fun to watch.
One of the linebackers I forgot to mention when I mentioned all those linebackers.
Right, he's rising up there for sure.
No question. Well, Ben, once again, thanks so much for joining us here on the Journey to the Draft podcast, driven by AAA. Stay safe, stay healthy. Happy Thanksgiving. We'll talk to you soon.
Yeah, thanks so much, Frank. Go Birds.
Now it's time for Pick 6.
Well, back again for another round of Pick 6 is my buddy Ross Tucker. Ross, welcome back, man.
Don't say that to me until you tell me the results from last week. What are the results first? That's what I need to know.
All right, so You won an over-under. You had you took Wapfire, the Indiana wide receiver, over-under 49.5. He went 56 yards against Ohio State, so you just snuck in there by 6.5 yards to get that win. I, however, took LSU to beat Arkansas, and that got me a W. Demetric Felton far surpassed the over-under I said on 99.5. I took the over. You took the under. So all in all, I picked up one game on you, extended my lead to 6. Out of, the last 12 weeks of college football.
Yeah, so then tell me that first before you ask me how I'm doing. I'm not doing good. I'm competitive. I want to win. Let's do this.
All right, well, let's get to the first one, and this one's going to hit close to home. Big Ten matchup here. Straight up, how do you feel about Penn State versus Michigan? Who do you like in this game?
Yeah, I'll go Michigan. A, they're playing at home. B, I think they've kind of found something with this quarterback, Dylan McNamara, and Penn State is a very tough watch. They've had so many issues. I don't know if I've ever seen anything like this. They just came off the best 4-year run probably in school history. I think they had 2 11-win seasons, a 10-win season, and a 9-win season. 3 of the 4 years, they went to New Year's 6 bowls. They won 2 of them and lost to Sam Darnold in the Rose Bowl, the other one. I thought this would be their best team, Fran. I thought this would be the best team in James Franklin's tenure, and it's clearly the worst. Maybe they snap out of it this week. I can't predict that to happen. I'll take the Wolverines.
Why do you think it's been so bad? Why do you think they're 0-5 right now?
They lost their best defensive player by far. They lost their best offensive player. Now they lost their second best offensive player. Journey Brown and Freiermuth done for the year now. And they switched offensive coordinator, defensive line coach, and offensive line coach. But in particular, OC and O-line coach, and had no reps with those guys until 2-a-days. And then you lose your first 2 games, and it's like the season's basically over. I mean, for them, it was college football playoff, Big Ten championship or bust. And I just think it's hard with everything else going on for guys to get motivated when all of their goals are done after the first 2 games.
So Penn State's been a tough watch. All the things you just said, I completely agree with. That being said, I'm going to take the Nittany Lions here to overtake Michigan. And here's the why. It's the same kind of thinking I had last week with LSU. They hadn't been playing well. They, unlike Penn State, they had like some time off. They missed a couple games due to COVID. I just feel like there was a lot of controversy off the field with the athletics department. I just look at Penn State coming in, and I'm like, all right, where's the matchup that they can win this game? And I think if you can get after the quarterback with Michigan, and they've had some changes, as you alluded to. You look at Shaka Toney, you look at Jason Owe. I feel like that defensive line is the strength of this team from a talent standpoint right now with who's playing, who's on the field. I'm like, all right, if they can get after this Michigan offensive line, if they can impact the quarterback, not every game has been really, really ugly. So I'm going to take a look at this matchup and say, look, Michigan had to go to a couple overtimes to beat Rutgers. Let's see if Penn State, who's played some tough opponents, pretty tough. I'm going to look here at Penn State getting the W. We'll see ultimately how that goes. Let's go to a big one here in the Big 12. Texas against Ohio State. 2 teams that have won 3 straight. Ross, how do you like this one? Texas, Ohio, and Iowa State.
Yeah, I was going to say big difference between Iowa State and Ohio State.
A little bit of a different one. That would be a big matchup too. But Texas versus the Iowa State Cyclones.
Yeah, you know what? I'm going to take Texas. And I know they're having an up and down year. I still think, though, I mean, every kid for Iowa State would have gone to Texas if Texas offered them a scholarship. They still have talent. Love the quarterback matchup here. But I'm gonna pick Texas to get the win here. I feel like they've righted the ship a little bit.
I think so too, and I think you look at Texas, and they've had a couple tough losses early. Iowa State has actually beaten, I think, all of the common opponents that they've had. Texas lost to Oklahoma, they lost to TCU. Iowa State beat both of those teams earlier this season. But I don't know, man. I just feel like Texas is starting to turn it on at the right time. I like Joseph Osai in this game to get after Brock Purdy, get after that Iowa State offense. The big thing is, can they stop the run, the Longhorns? Can they stop Breece Hall from getting going? But ultimately, I like Joseph Osai, that Texas defense, getting after Brock Purdy and kind of changing the course of this game. I like Sam Ehlinger as well and what he can do in this matchup. So I will take the Longhorns as well. So we're on separate sides, Penn State, Michigan, on the same side in Texas, Iowa State. Let's go Pac-12. Let's go West Coast here. 2 teams looking for their first win. Who do you like here, Stanford or Cal?
Ooh, I don't like either one of them, but I'll go with Stanford to win the football game. You said, who do I like? I don't like either one. I'll go with Stanford. I'm still going to trust David Shaw, their recruiting, that coaching staff over Cal. Rivalry game. I know it hasn't been great for Stanford, but I expect them to get this one done.
So I'm going to go the opposite way. And I love David Shaw. I love that program. I also kind of like what Cal has been building too defensively over the last couple of years. I know they had some turnover coming from 2019 to 2020. They had some guys initially opt out, but then opt back in. I look at Cam Bynum at the cornerback position. I'm like, all right, let's see what this defense can do if they can kind of get things going here against this Stanford offense. I know they're still kind of getting things straightened out along the offensive line, which historically has been a strength for that program. Davis Mills back off the COVID list, but not quite. This is the quarterback for Stanford, not quite to the level that I think people were projecting early in the offseason. So I'm going to go with this Cal defense to come up and get the win over Stanford. So we'll get the 3 games in. I'm on one side on 2 of them. We're on the same side on the other. Let's go now to an over-under. And these 2 were actually really fun. I like doing these. We're going to go to the Iron Bowl. We're going to go to Alabama, Auburn. And that's what's really fun is that even though it seems like we're not all the way in through these schedules and it's early in the Pac-12, it's midway through the season in the SEC, it's rivalry weekend here in college football. We've got the Iron Bowl. We've got the Civil War. We've got the game. We've got so many big games here this weekend. Iron Bowl, Alabama, Auburn. Over under 3.5 passing touchdowns for Alabama quarterback Mac Jones in this game. What are you taking there, over under?
I'm going to go over. I kind of went back and forth on this. I thought under initially because Najee Harris might get some touchdowns down near the goal line. I don't know, man. Alabama's a machine. I'll go over. I think there's going to be a lot of points in this one.
I think so, too. I'm going to go the under as well. This kind of surprised me, Russ, because you look at Mac Jones and you're like, all right, he kind of have seesawed back and forth here. 4 touchdowns, 2 touchdowns, 4 touchdowns, 2 touchdowns. So that's why I went with 3.5 as the number. But then I look at Auburn and I'm looking at their box scores. They've only allowed more than 1 passing touchdown once this season, and that was against Felipe Franks in Arkansas. Every other game, Kentucky, Georgia, South Carolina, LSU, Ole Miss, he was throwing it all over the yard. 1 touchdown or less in all of those games. So they're doing something right defensively. I know they've got some guys in the front 7. You look at Big Cat Bryant. I know that they've got a couple of players on the defensive side. I have not done studies on the guys in the back 7. I've done KJ Britt, the middle linebacker. He's not an impact player against the pass. But I'll tell you what, this Auburn defense, they're doing something right. I'm going to take the under 3.5, a heavy number. He's reached it a couple times here this season, Mac Jones. But I'll bet on the Auburn defense, and we'll see if they're able to come through for me. So we're separate on opposite sides here, 3 of the first 4. Let's go to our 5th. Another over-under. This one was another fun one. 79.5 is the number. Does Notre Dame, who has the best run defense in the ACC, allow either of the North Carolina running backs, Michael Carter or Javonte Williams, break 79.5 yards rushing as an individual, not as a group, but either of these guys crack 80 yards ultimately in this game? Again, Notre Dame, best run defense in the ACC, only 719 yards allowed on the ground over 9 games. That's 2.7 yards per carry. Ultimately, how do you feel about it? So are you taking the over or are you taking the under?
I'm going under, and I think part of the problem is that there's 2 of them and that they split the yards. They're going to be trailing in the game. Notre Dame's going to have the lead. They're going to be throwing it with Sam Howell. I like Notre Dame to hold these guys under the 79.5.
I went back and forth, and I actually, I'm not going to give it away. I almost picked North Carolina as my upset special this week, Ross. I thought about it. I tell you what, I talked about it earlier this week on the show. I studied these North Carolina backs last week. And I like both guys. You look at Michael Carter, he cracked 80 yards in each of the first 3 games, 4 of the first 5. Only 3 games all season he hasn't done it. This North Carolina offense, they're the best rushing attack in the ACC. Javonte Williams, he's gone over 100 yards in 5 of the last 6 games. He's averaging either a first down or a touchdown on nearly 50% of his touches. That's from Pro Football Focus. I look at this rushing attack between those 2 guys. I'm going to bet on one of those 2 cracking the 80. I will take the over on that one. So this is a big week, Ross. This could really get you back here into the thick of things, or it's going to really extend my lead. We'll see ultimately how this one goes. Let's wrap it up with our upset special. I'll let you start things off. Who's one big upset you like here this weekend in college football and for a rivalry?
How about me doing this 2 weeks in a row, I'm taking the same team. I'm taking the Rutgers Scarlet Knights. They should have done it against Michigan. Yep. They had it triple overtime. Now they're playing Purdue. I think Rutgers has some good things going on right now. Purdue did get Rondale Moore back. That was significant. But out of these different options for this week, I like Rutgers to pull it off against Purdue. They are knocking on the door.
So, unbelievable that you take Rutgers back-to-back weeks for the upset special. I mean, I can't imagine anybody would have predicted that. I will go to the Big 12. And I'm going to go West Virginia over the Oklahoma Sooners. I just watched Bedlam this past week, Oklahoma State. I watched a lot of Oklahoma early in the year. I'll tell you what, though, this West Virginia defense, they are playing a lot better over the last month. I believe all 3 of their games, they've held the opponent under 20 points. Not something you typically see in the Big 12. I know Bruce Feldman from The Athletic has just recently written about that defense. I'm going to go with guys like Tony Fields, Darius Stills up front on the defensive line. They've got guys at all 3 levels. I'm going to go Mountaineers over Oklahoma this week, coming away with the W. That'll be a big win there for Neil Brown and that West Virginia coaching staff. Ross, what do you think here, man? 6 games down. We'll see if you can make up some ground on me this week.
Big swing week. Big swing. Potential for I'm swinging for the fences on some of these, but I have to. I got to catch up. There's only a few more weeks left.
No question. Well, Ross, we'll be sure to text each other back and forth as these games happen. Thanks so much once again for joining us on the Journey to the Draft podcast. Happy Thanksgiving to you and your family.
Yeah, likewise, Fran.
Hope you guys enjoyed this week's show here with Ross Tucker, Ben Solak, Ben Fennell as always. We'll be back next week right here on the Journey to the Draft podcast, driven by AAA.